Oh, no, actually, I actually really have changed how I wrote about these things. Yeah. But, starting things off with Brock, he has absolutely no rock moves. Across the board, no stabs. Extremely weak for the first gym leader. That's kind of pathetic. Misty, her Starmie might hurt, but it's really not that strong, all things considered. It's just one Pokemon, and she doesn't even have 3 Pokemon. She only has 2 of them. Yes, it is early game, and you may not have many Pokemon, but Starmie still doesn't have good moves, especially for this point. They're very weak. And again, the same of Lieutenant Surge's Raichu. It might have a strong Thunderbolt for this point, but stats have kind of caught up by this point. But Erica, and even, let's look at Koga, they don't have any moves over 65 base power, or with beneficial stats that back up with those same type attack bonuses. Not exactly a great gym leader for important battles. And yes, I am aware that in Generation 1 a lot of moves were not especially great, but even for this game's move access, they're kind of poor. Sabrina's Psychic types are a bit of a difficulty spike, especially with how strong the Psychic type is in Generation 1 with Special, but with the bad boosts, because there actually are boosts that your badges do give you to very specific stats, your speed is actually increased before you fight Sabrina by one of those badges. So that really does kind of curb her because you get it from Koga. Yes, most things in Generation 1 don't exactly have super fantastic special, but it isn't a horrible special stat. Remember, one of the reasons why things in Generation 1 are kind of remembered for hitting as hard as they do is because it was a bit harder to gain some levels and it did take a bit of time to gain levels. And yeah, her Alakazam is definitely a monster. It lacks Psychic. It lacks kind of the move that made Psychic types terrifying. Blaine, with the exception of his Arcanine, do not have a stab over 40 base power, where Arcanine has, the very powerful Fire Blast, but the rest of his team is relying on non-stab moves like Stomp or Takedown. Even Giovanni's gym battle carries this too. The final gym leader in the game is the exact same, with only his Dugtrio having a stab over 60 base power, with Vanitos and Rhydon, and also Rhyhorn, with the Nidos and the Rise having their strongest move be a normal type move. I would also like you to keep in mind Thrash is only a 90 base power move at this time, and Horndrill will miss if you are slower than what you're using it against, which, because of the poor speed the Rise have, that's not great. As well as I would also like to remind you, the Earthquake TM does exist, and they don't know it. And yeah, not a great gym leader team. Not a great gym leader team. Prior to that, you have his 2 Team Rocket leader battles where you fight him as the leader of Team Rocket, but it's the same in these prior 2 battles. The reason why we're sectioning this out in terms of gym leaders, evil teams, rivals, Elite Four, Champion, all those being separate from one another for, again, simplicity. Yeah, it looks a little weird, but again, we're showing the teams on screen right now, so for comparisons. But yeah, his prior 2 Team Rocket battles, they're using just normal moves, or extremely low base power stabs, even for the points in the game you're fighting them at. These are pathetic. There are no admins. That wasn't, until the later games they added those in. Onto the rival fights, your rival Blue. Until the fight on the SSN, his Abra is complete dead weight. It has no attacking moves, only teleport. And until then, the exception of Raticate, which has an 80 base power high prime, which is extremely powerful, none of his team is that great. Yes, by the time he does get Cadabra, its 120 base power special and its 105 speed are quite strong for this point, but Confusion is only 50 base power. That is pretty weak comparatively, and it does kind of undermine the exceptionally high special attack it does have for this point. Pretty much unless you're weak to it, or you have paper thin special, which really a lot of things that Gen 1 actually don't have, it's kind of an exaggeration, you're not going to go down to this thing easily. When you fight him in Lavender Town, his team is stat curbed into being substantially weaker. Stats have grown a bit since then, and things are starting to get a bit outpaced. This is where he drops off a bit. Cadabra really doesn't have the same stats it did comparatively by now, again, because of evolutions and everything like that, and leveling up. And Gyarados lacks a stab. Silph is pretty much the exact same. Psybeam is a little scary, kind of, but again, it really isn't that strong of a move. Non-stabs are 90 base power or less, and the stabs are 60 or less, with the only move in any of his teams being of noteworthy threat potential besides the Psybeam, which even then isn't that much, is the high critical hit chance that Razor Leaf has. Which, that is actually quite scary, but that's one Pokemon that's one of his possible teams. Gyarados' Dragon Rage may be a problem in some cases, but again, this is a lot more situational based on base HP, because by this point, levels are pretty high, base HPs have not base HPs, but just HP stats have kind of grown a bit. Sure, 40 damage flat might be something to some Pokemon, but your HP stats have grown by this point to be pretty sizable. However, by Route 22, he has stepped up. Psychic on his Alakazam, it's a bit strong. It's actually quite fierce. But that is only a single Pokemon. His next threatening team is, well, the Charizard one. Well, yeah, however, Hydro Pump from Gyarados, yes, Gyarados does have a very respectable special stat at 100, but that's really the best it offers. Is one Pokemon with Hydro Pump and one Pokemon with Psychic. The Charizard, however, does have Flame, though, which is actually quite respectable. So it does have 3 decent moves on 3 decent Pokemon, but even then, the Hydro Pump from Gyarados really isn't that super threatening. But I will say, Gyarados is a very solid Pokemon, so it is quite good. But again, one specific team and his other teams are kind of not really that great. So again, it's one team with some good Pokemon, or other teams with not great Pokemon. Because his Pidgeot's weak, and and all of his teams have 2 underleveled Pokemon at a minimum. Again, that's what I mean by it really undermines the strength of those other moves when the rest of the teams really can't keep up. The Elite Four is where things, however, will take a little bit of a step up, but that really doesn't say a whole lot. Lorelei's Lapras is a very competent Pokemon, and the Cloyster with an 85 special is quite good, especially with its amazing physical bulk. Jinx does have excellent damage with its amazing special, but that's really all her team has. She has some good Pokemon, definitely some great points, but also some weak points in others, as we saw. But Bruno swings back to the weak end. He has 2 Onyx, a toothless Hitmonchan, because all of the punches are using its pitiful 35 special, because they were all special back then. Machamp is a 20% chance to miss, which, I mean, we joke about moves missing a whole lot, but when you have so far 3 Pokemon that are almost completely toothless, one Pokemon with its best option being a 20% chance to miss is not exactly great. The only thing he has that's actually competently powerful and semi-reliable is actually his 90% accurate high jump kicks from his Hitmonchan. Not Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, sorry, I keep getting them mixed up. But yeah, Hitmonlee is actually quite a force, but again, one Pokemon can't carry everything. Even 2 when you consider Machamp, they can't carry everything. Agatha is, to be honest, a complete joke. She is a joke. Nightshade is kind of a threat, but Gengar is extremely frail, and anything with base 6, not 600, anything that is a base 60 HP or higher should have at the bare minimum 160 HP, making it able to safely survive 3 Nightshades. And with Gengar's bulk, yeah, that's doing nothing. Dream Eater is her only strong move, and its limitation of having the opposing Pokemon that it's being hit with it need to be asleep really kneecaps it. Because it's such as simple as either switching out or even just, well, waking up or missing completely destroys it. Lance, however, is a bit of a solidly difficult trainer. But with the exception of Hydro Pump, all of his moves are normal type. Anything with a competent physical defense utterly walls his team again, aside from the Hydro Pump from Gyarados. And as we've gone over prior, and actually even right before with, well, Agatha, 40 HP and damage from Dragon Rage is pitiful by this point, because of how high HP stats are due to levels. Anything with an Ice or Rock move will just end his team extremely easily. However, your rival is now the champion, and let's see what improvements he's made for his team now that he is champion. Yeah, they're no good. Sure, Sky Attack is a very strong move, but it's 2 turns, and a Pidgeot surviving anything longer than enough time to use it, I highly doubt it. Rhydon only has normal moves. Arcanine still has Ember. Executor only has normal type Stomp and Barrage. But it does also have Hypnosis, which actually is a pretty good move. So, if it can put something to sleep, not bad. But again, only normal type moves to back up its attacking. Venusaur does have a ruthlessly strong Solar Beam, but again, like Sky Attack, it is a 2-turn charge move, and unlike Pidgeot, it's not exactly the speediest thing in the world. And again, Sunny Day didn't exist yet. Yes, Charizard, Blastoise, and Gyarados all have a very powerful 120 base power move, and Alakazam does have its very fast, powerful Psychic. The badge boosts are what really kneecap this. It is important to remember that you do have stat boosts from your badges backing you up in all of these fights, and that really does undermine the power of those kinds of moves. Yes, Hydro Pump, Fire Blast are very powerful moves in most cases, but when you've got a passive boost to all of your stats, the percentage will actually be put right here, because I actually don't remember off the top of my head, and I'm not sure where in my script I actually have that. Even with they do have a decent chance to miss as well, so that again further undermines them and really takes away from their huge power when they hit, that they're not exactly the most reliable, both on the accuracy end and on the, they're not hitting really as hard as a move of its caliber normally would in any other setting. Because again, the badge boosts. And yes, Alakazam and the Venusaur Razor Leafs will result in likely higher chance of getting critical hits. These really can't save the team. They're not great moves. Even for this game, these movesets are pretty poor. Yes, I am aware a lot of moves that we are commonly associated with, such as TMs like Flamethrower, were not actually TMs in this generation. But that really doesn't excuse a lot of these Pokemon. I mean, a water type that doesn't have Surf. I mean, Surf still exists. It's an HM. Earthquake is on not Rhydon when it's a TM that does exist. Again, this is what I mean by these movesets are extremely bad even for this game, because a lot of these moves did exist, and they're simply just not placed on teams. Again, furthering that with the badge boosts, undercuts basically everything on these teams that is even slightly decent. Most of the Pokemon fought throughout the entire game follow this exact same trend. Weak moves, not great stats, and just having to rely on non-stab moves for their biggest damage, which in the cases where the Pokemon do have very good stats on the base stat spread, not having a strong move that is further boosted by stab really undercuts them. And yes, there were not a whole lot of great moves back in Generation 1, especially with TMs. You know, TMs for Flamethrower, Ice Beam, and a lot of the TMs we commonly ascribe to things in the game weren't existent yet. However, there's still a number of moves that did exist that a lot of these Pokemon simply don't have. And that is what really kneecaps this game. Moves existing, but Pokemon not having them when there is the access. And it's only at the very end of the game that decent moves do actually enter the picture. And it's only at the end, and even then, they're only slightly decent. However, let's move on to Yellow, where things actually do step up a little bit. Consistently, these earlier gym leaders do actually have stronger moves. Quick little flash right around here, because we've been over most of these teams already. We don't really need to reiterate ourselves, 10 billion times. Things like Erica actually having in the game, 70 base power Petal Dances, or Blaine actually having Flamethrower on some Pokemon. Giovanni having a number of Earthquake users is also a big step up in terms of his team getting bolstered. It actually is quite good now. Again, relatively speaking, but again, that isn't that hard. The Elite Four changes are actually quite minimal, but still a joke in most cases. Same fights, kind of with better moves, but even then, the improvements are not extreme. They're not extensive. Blue overall does actually have a greatly reworked team, so it is a little more respectable, but that really doesn't change things all that much. Even with how broken a lot of the mechanics are in Generation 1, it's still ridiculously easy. As most Pokemon still don't have great sets on the whole, some do have better sets, but not the best. And, well, not even not the best, but not even great. They're more passable than actually good in this case. They're better than the original games, but an improvement on the bare minimum really isn't much of an improvement. Or at least, I wouldn't say it is much of an improvement. Because you're still going against things that largely have 90 or lower base power non-stabs and 60 or lower power stabs. Again, not that much has actually changed. So again, it's a little more difficult than the first games, but not a whole lot. Most of the difficulty people do attribute to this game really is because the lack of understanding mechanics. Remember, this was the first game, actually the first several games. People didn't really understand how the games worked and really how stats and moves really interacted with one another. People were just clicking buttons, essentially. That's pretty much all people did early on. Going back and actually looking at the game under much more of a microscope, and, also considering the fact that a lot of kids didn't really have the patience to go level up and would fight the champion and gym leaders under-leveled, really factors in a lot here. When you fight things at even leveled, especially in these games, they're nothing at all. But, again, fighting the games in those ways when younger really does leave a very large impression. The unfortunate part is that impression really kind of poisons the ability to look at things in a much more objective way. And again, the badge boosts, we've been over them before in a slight capacity, but now it's time to go over them a little bit more in-depth, even though I put the thing down before. In Gens 1, 2, and 3, these are all present. When you earn a certain badge, you will gain a 12.5% stat boost to that on every Pokemon. Really, really powerful. In Generation 3, however, this is downgraded to a 10% stat mod, but even then, that's still pretty powerful. We'll be getting to Generation 2 next time, because this video has gone on for a long time. Again, these videos were a lot longer than I actually expected them to be. So, time to reboot, and see you guys next time.